Hey everybody, welcome to Bill's Sports and Wrestling channel. I am Bill. Well, Hart family dirty laundry is out there again in the wrestling world. Of course, it seems as though the name Bret the Hitman Hart, many years after he's retired, still holds a lot of water out there. That being said, however, his sister Diana Hart-Smith, not only Bret's sister, but the wife of the late great British Bulldog Davy Boy Smith, had a little something to say. But was everything she said necessarily true? Check out this video as I talk about it. So obviously, another thing that's controversial right now, and it has nothing to do with WrestleMania, it's statements made by Diana Hart-Smith, or as I call her, Diana the Grifter Hart. Long before this ever came out, I've never been a big fan of her. I always think that she's been, again, there's nothing wrong with, to me, there's a classy way to do things. For example, to keep legacies alive, and I'm just specifying on wrestling here, to keep the legacies alive of wrestlers who have passed or died, I don't think there's a problem with keeping their legacies alive, per se. The one who does it in the most classy fashion is Barbara Goodrich, the widow of Bruiser Brody. She has done a very classy job, her and her son, I might add, of keeping Bruiser Brody's name alive. Bruiser Brody, of course, for those who may not know, some younger fans, was tragically in Puerto Rico due to a dispute with one of the higher-ups in the company at the World Wrestling Council. And they've done a great job of keeping his legacy alive. And I'm sure, yes, they make some money from it. But there's no hypocrisy there. There's no two-faced statements. There's no outright lying, really. Anna is those things. And I've said that for many years. Now, some people say Bret Hart is a mark for himself, which there's validity to that statement. I don't know if he's a mark or so much as he just was very proud of his legacy. But the thing is, let's just say for argument's sake that Bret is a mark for himself. I do believe that Bret has a tendency to buy into his own hype, and Bret Hart is, for those who don't know, my all-time favorite wrestler. Most of you probably watching this do know. He is my all-time favorite wrestler, but there are certain things he has done that is just, again, yeah, Goldberg was careless into his career. Agreed. Time to move on. But part of me also believes that Bret is doing this simply to get attention still. That's what wrestlers do, and I think it's still wrong. I think you're Bret Hart. You don't have to go on about that. There's a lot of stories that you can tell that people want to hear. A lot of them in this book. And also, I'm going to say right now as well that, again, I'm not necessarily going to purely 120% attack Diana for wanting to keep her husband's legacy alive, but she was shit-talking him right up till he died. And maybe it was true, though, and maybe she had a good reason to do it, but now suddenly he's the greatest person in the world? Are you doing it for the sake of your kids? Maybe, but it's not like they're young anymore either. I think Harry's like about 40. And this is what bothers me about the whole thing. It's the hypocrisy, it's the two-face of it, and it's the fact that she's actually saying things that are just utterly not true, refuted by things in Bret Hart's book. She even just posted 5 hours ago that Bret's trying to downplay Davy's injuries. He never did. That is just not a fact. So, I'm going to start from what Diana said at the beginning of this whole thing. With the post made April 14th, does not present his statements as opinions, he states them as facts. Okay, there's some validity there. The distinction matters because many of his claims, specifically about Davy's physical or mental state of SummerSlam 1992, are simply not true. Okay, that part, one side, the other, true somewhere in the middle, probably. It's my opinion that Bret's current misrepresentation of the events of SummerSlam 92 may be influenced by the stroke he had in the summer of 2002. What cannot be ignored is the timing that Davy died prior to that in May of 2002. There was a full decade, 1992 to 2002, where Bret could have raised his claims directly with Davy, if they were legitimate. He never did, not once. The absurd and hurtful accusations began years after Davy was no longer alive to respond. That's not true. Bret actually talked about this, I believe, in an RF Video Shoot interview in 2001. I think that's where it was. But I do remember him mentioning this before Bulldog had passed away. It was not long before, but it was still before. So instead, Bret now frames this, Diana again, over and over, despite my appeals to him with facts and critical reasoning to please restrain and refrain his slander. But he refuses. Bret now frames this incredible match as great solely because of his own alleged brilliance. Okay, there's a point there too. Assigning himself all the credit while dismissing Davy's invaluable role. Brett's narrative is not supported by history, by documentation, or by what audiences can plainly see as they watch the match himself, without Brett's overlapping and slandering words. Okay, no, there's literally spots in that match where Brett himself was pointed out that clearly he was helping Davey through, but again, that's wrestling. Sometimes that just happens. Do I believe Brett is outright lying? No. Do I believe he's embellishing and exaggerating like he has a tendency to do? Yes. So Davey's performance shows no evidence of impairment. Maybe not impairment, but certainly there was points in that match where he wasn't really on his game, but who cares? It was a great match. Anyway, on the contrary, it reflects Davey's professionalism, strength, and focus despite the fact that he was recovering from necrotizing fasciitis, a serious and life-threatening flesh-eating infection. That could be true. Davey did not complain, seek sympathy, or disclose his condition to the public. He simply did the work. It is difficult to reconcile these facts with Brett's retroactive claims, except to note that a long-standing pattern of self-aggrandizement okay. In my opinion, and I'm very clear that this is opinion, Brett's tendency toward ego, bullying, and exaggeration / embellishment, embellishment and exaggeration, again, that is true, predates both his stroke and the match in question. I base that on my lived experience growing up with him as my older brother and decades of observed behavior towards family members and colleagues. Oh, you mean like your idiot brother Bruce? What I will not accept is history being rewritten after the fact, especially when the person, Davey, being totally discredited is no longer allowed to defend himself. Davey was so good and loyal to Brett. Okay, here's the thing about that match, too. One of my all-time favorites. And yes, I do believe Brett is exaggerating and embellishing his statements on this. Were there moments in the match, and you can plainly see it, if you really observe and you actually listen to the specific moments Brett points out to. Now, some of what Diana's saying has validity there. But here's the thing. Brett, again, I believe, stated that Davey was in a rough shape and had to lead him through the SummerSlam match. And again, Brett did an RF video interview. It was either in 2000 or 2001. Shortly after his WCW contract, I think, he was let go. But I know it was in that era. I know it was before he had the stroke. I know it was before Davey Boy died. I was into tape trading a lot back then, and I had that tape, I remember, solely before Bulldog passed away. But that's the thing. Brett also talks about it publicly in his book, which came out back in 2007, and is one of the biggest selling wrestling books of all time. I just wonder why this is coming out now. Now, Diana does mention, and this is true, the fact that she's probably told Brett several times, and I actually believe that she probably has, because, again, where's her bread buttered? Bulldog's legacy. But does Diana forget that, she actually wrote one of these? Yeah, because now that it's been banned from shelves and it's not available, and I know it's available in some libraries because I've seen it there, she claimed that Davey was not a good person in a lot of ways. So either A, she's outright lying, B, it's true, and now she's just, again, grifting off his legacy. Either way, none of them are good. So I'm going to go on further here. So she made another post, so it said, fact, not opinion, that Davey was suffering from a knee injury, and emergency medical records here from July 21st, 1992 prove this. I've explained this over and over to Brett, but he says that I don't know what I'm talking about. And that he is right. That is a lie. Outright lie, because Brett acknowledges Davey's injury from that time in his book. And I'm going to read it right now. It's on page 291 of Bret Hart's book. So here we go. So after the TV taping, it was the usual party. And this is July 1992. After the TV taping, there was the usual party atmosphere at the hotel. But I was careful not to indulge. As part of my training regimen leading up to SummerSlam, I cut back on drinking and late nights. Davey, however, had no trouble throwing them back. So we were all surprised the next morning that he was suddenly in severe agony. He'd injured his knee during his match the night before, but the handful of Demerol he had taken afterwards had numbed him enough to convince him he was okay. Then in the wee hours of the morning, the drug wore off. Davey was rushed home to where he and Diana were living in Florida and ended up being off for the rest of the summer, which made me worry about our upcoming match and about him. So again, Brett acknowledges there was an injury in July of 1992. So again, I don't know what Diana's talking about here. Okay, it's true. Where did Brett lie? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I have waited to see if he would abide by my family's wishes and request for him to stop his one-sided narrative about Davey, who's not here to call Brett out on anything. Brett pushes it further each time, though. He does it with many other wrestlers, some who are no longer alive and some who are. Don't know why Brett ever needed to say anything but praise their SummerSlam 92 match Davey had with him. He's the only one I know who criticized it. Davey was so good at Brett. Brett never criticized the match. He said it was great. Anyway, so she goes on. Fact, not opinion. Davey was being treated for the last week of July 1992, but was later diagnosed as vasculitis, flesh-eating disease. Thank God he did not lose a leg or die. Okay, this is true. I think Davey did mention this in an interview. Jim and Ellie Neidhart were helpful in literally carrying Davey to Spring Hill, Florida, so we could get a doctor to help us. Davey never said to Brett that he was doing coke with Jim. So again, you go on about Davey not being here to defend himself, but Jim Neidhart's not alive to corroborate your story. Davey was not doing coke with Jim despite Brett's claim. That was just Brett making something up in his head due to his confabulation. He needs to stop it, stroke or not. And I never told Brett anything ever to support this. Neither did Davey, nor Jim, nor Ellie, or anyone. Again, how can Jim Neidhart be alive to corroborate that? Ellie is still alive. But again, Ellie and Diana are like that apparently from all the stuff I've read from books and whatnot. So we're probably going to take her side either way. It is all in, and Brett's not close with Ellie. It is all in Brett's head from perhaps different events getting short-wired in his brain after his stroke. He was saying this before his stroke, Diana. Although he was always been unnecessarily critical and hard on Davey. Again, flat out lie. Brett never phoned her Florida home except maybe 3 times in the span of 5 years. If he had ever called Davey during July or August 1992 in Florida or Goulburn, UK, Davey would have talked to Brett. Again, that's one of those, one side, that side, in the middle somewhere. Those two did not need to piece a match together over the phone over the weeks leading to SummerSlam 92. Brett never did that. Again, lie. And neither did Davey. That was not the Stampede Wrestling style. This isn't Stampede, Diana, this is WWF. Different style. Just like Davey didn't need to piece-by-piece matches over weeks, whether it was wrestling Dynamite to Warlord, or to Tiger Mask, to Undertaker, to Owen, to The Rock, to Jimmy Briggs, to Johnny Smith, etc. Now, that's true. Again, but every wrestler says is that any place they wrestle is different, especially the territory days. Chris Jericho mentions in his book how different even WCW and WWF were drastically in terms of style that you had to wrestle. So, no, she's up her ass on that one. And in 1992, there was a strict drug testing policy in place. And Davey was not exempt from the weekly test, which, by the way, he would fail and get let go months later. Sicker on the road, he did not fail any drug tests during those months. Yeah, specify during those months. He still failed one in the fall, and I still believe that their drug testing was pretty flawed. That's just me, and a lot of wrestlers themselves have stated that. A lot of wrestlers themselves have stated they were on drugs in this era. Note, Road Warrior Hawk, who, yes, is not here to defend himself, but has self-admittedly done a lot of things. Even Animal mentioned how fucked up Road Warrior Hawk was leading to SummerSlam 92. Oy. But anyway, so again, Diana's going on still. Davey had x-rays taken of his left knee in Merced Hospital in Portland, Maine. Again, Brett's not denying any of this. Upon Vince McMahon's insistence, as Davey crawled into the TV tapings in Maine with a high fever and extremely swollen left leg/knee, he did not look well. Davey was scheduled to wrestle Repo Man that night. Davey continued to feel worse. After coming back to the tapings after x-rays, Vince insisted Davey go home and get better. Okay, again, Brett acknowledges this. I was in Calgary filming interviews for SummerSlam 92 with my mom, dad, brother, Bruce. I remember those. Bruce. Bruce is the president of his own fan club. Maybe Brett is, but at least Brett has fans of his. Davey phoned me to say that he was going home, and Ellie and Jim were picking him up at the airport. The next day, Davey phoned saying he was not getting better, but told me to finish my Calgary interviews, and we talked again the next day. But he didn't feel like talking. He just wanted to sleep. Within a few days, Ellie called me, saying Davey was not getting better, and she felt we all should fly back to Florida home. Harry, Georgia, and I flew home, that's her kids, that weekend, and took Davey to see a doctor whom our chiropractor and friend Dr. Doug Price recommended. These are facts, not opinions, but again, Brett is not denying any of this and acknowledges a lot of it. Okay, so here's the thing. Now, this is about the drug use. Now, again, Diana herself, and I'm going to get to this, has stated about Davy's drug use before he died. But, it's okay because he was still alive. But now he's the greatest person ever, according to her. Again, there's just some two-faced, double-speak nature here. Mind you, she is a Trump supporter, so that makes sense. So Davy was in Goulburn, England, with our family. It's a new post about 6 hours ago. Davy was in Goulburn, England, with our family to visit and to be with his family there. His mom and dad were very helpful and comforting all of us as Davy continued recuperating from his infection and prepared for SummerSlam 92. They were worried about Davy's knee. Brett did not ever phone Davy's parents' house or regarding talks with Davy about the upcoming match with him. Brett definitely had their home number, as Davy's mom and dad graciously let Brett and Julie stay with them for weeks in 1981. Okay, that's literally a decade before. They kept the same number right up till the home of Goulburn, sold about 5 years ago. Okay, fair enough. Opinion. Brett claims Davy could not get on the plane to fly Wembley Stadium, not to Goulburn, the day of the match. That is indeed an opinion, because, fact, Jim Neidhart said it was hard to get Davy on the plane. Yes, he said that when we all flew to Manchester in mid-1992, which was about 2 weeks prior to the event, and that was referring to what his concerns was about the infection in Davy's left knee. It was about how he'd react to high air pressure during flying. Fact, Davy was clearly in his hometown area of Goulburn the days leading up to SummerSlam 92. Davy was so proud to be a part of that event and main eventing with Brett. There's absolutely no way he could have done or would have done anything to jeopardize it. Consider the stories I've heard about Bulldog, not just from Diana, Brett, anyone else. That isn't necessarily true. Had he not been so ill, he would have been able to train for it and not literally been on the couch or bed weeks leading up to it. Davy was so proud of how the match went. For Brett to claim Davy was doing drugs at that time, or with Jim, or anyone in my family, such a slap in the face, anyone who truly cared about Davy, and praying he'd be the phenomenal asset, as was Brett, to that amazing match. And Brett never said any of this until Davy was dead. Again, not true. After his stroke, confabulation. Which is like Trump. She likes to use big words to try to get her point across, but really isn't. But Davy doesn't need to be collateral damage from Brett's stroke. Seems like Davy's become a victim of a stroke victim. Oh, shut up. Davy never liked being a victim. He was so tough and such a good guy. And most of all the wrestlers loved him. Okay, that part's true. But here's the thing. Brett was not the one. According to Brett, again, this is 2007 this is written. So, as summer slipped away, I spent my time training and working on another big cartoon drawing of all the wrestlers, this time for Vince. I couldn't help but feel indebted to him. I constantly phoned Davey from Florida. Again, that could be he said, she said, somewhere in the middle. But all Diana could tell me was that he was out with Jim somewhere. I finally tracked Jim down just hours before I was leaving for England. Shocked when he told me that he had just taken Davey and Diana to the airport. Davey was high as a kite when he caught his flight. Jim said. And by the way, Jim Neidhart was alive and coherent still in the brain when Brett wrote this book. Because he'd been up all night smoking crack with him. Jim told me that Davey had a gorilla on his back and he was worried about him. I wish Jim would take a good look at himself. And again, Neidhart's problems are well documented. So again, no, it's not Brett who claimed it was Neidhart. Well, Neidhart was alive. And Brett says that. Neidhart never came out and refuted any of that. Neidhart was still doing interviews and that right up till... Again, I think he only got... When did he get bad? I know Natalia said something like this. But he didn't get bad till like a decade after this book was written almost. So, if he could have probably read an outright lie if he thought Brett was telling it. So, yes. And again, now, the whole thing about being in Goulburn. Now, again, Brett doesn't deny that. Because, again, here's what he says. This is now page 292. When I arrived in London, this is Brett's book. When I arrived in London, hundreds of fans poured out of the hotel lobby to chant my name in the streets. I set out to find Davey, but he was off somewhere with Diana and his family. So again, Brett acknowledges that he was somewhere with the family. He said he didn't see him until the entrance rehearsal at Wembley Stadium the night before the show. So again, yes, a lot of this is he said, she said, it's true somewhere in the middle. A lot of this is Diana outright lying. And again, I've always said this about her. Being a big Bret Hart fan, and his family's dirty laundry has been very public for many years now. Well, pretty much since Owen died, I would say. And that's, again, Owen died. It'll be 27 years. We're coming up on it in a month. 27 years. And his family has been in the public eye. Yes, some of them, even Bret, should probably keep his mouth shut sometimes. But again, Bret acknowledges a lot of this. He doesn't deny a lot of this. So I don't see what she's going on about. But again, I just think she's trying for attention because she always struck me as someone who's attention grabbing. And the way she acted on TV, apparently from what I've been reading, the way she acted behind the scenes, from not just claims from Brett, and claims from a lot of people, how she was just eager to be a star. She thinks she is a star the way she acts on social media sometimes, the way she, their Facebook and Twitter profiles and that. You know, and I think the one worse than her, honestly, is Bruce. So, there you go. But now, here's the meat and potatoes. Bombshell! Diana wrote a book. Some of you may not know. Some of you do know. Some of you even acknowledged it. Yet the bulldog is such, again, I'm just saying this from the perspective of what she herself has said. If the bulldog is such a great person, because she has to make him seem good to make money off of his legacy still, this is actual verbatim from her book. Now, I read her book, Diana's book. It came out, I believe, in 2000. Yeah, it was in 2001. I was 18 going on 19. And I remember I read it at a local Chapters, bookstore, which is now Indigo. But I read it at a local Chapters. I was going to buy it, but I figured my house already had enough toilet paper. So this is exactly what Diana Hart said in her book. She said, this is chapter 25, page 89. If anyone is watching that was a victim of sexual assault, this might be triggering for you. I'm not even trying to make a joke, not kidding. So maybe get off the feed. Just warning you. So again, viewer discretion is advised. This is what Diana said verbatim in her book, again, chapter 25, page 89, from 2001, a book called Under the Mat, which is pure trash. Quote, Davey told me a Florida wrestler named Duke the Dumpster Droese figured out how to make GHB liquid. Now, Duke Droese has recently been outed as a complete scumbag. So, continuing. Davey began giving it to me without my knowledge. At the time, all I knew was that unusual things were happening to me. I developed really bad hemorrhoids and woke up with my posterior burning and sore. I felt something bad happening to me during the night, but couldn't understand what. I thought maybe I was losing my mind. Part of being married is able to trust the person you are married to. I never dreamed of Davey was slipping me this nightly glass of orange juice in order to violate me. It just never even occurred to me. I shared my symptoms with my sister Ellie. Without batting an eye, she sighed. Yeah, Jim used to do the same thing to me. Also interesting. I bit my lip. After taking the orange juice Davey gives me at night, I'll wake up in my bed and not even remember how I got there. He was at the point where the only way he wanted to be with me was if I were unconscious. I guess in a really weird up way. I felt flattered that he desired me. I rationalized that he still loved me. What a screwed up relationship. Does that sound like someone who wrote that have credibility now? Because like I said, she's doing one of two things with that quote or that whole book even. She's lying through her teeth. Again, the book, it should be noted, was pulled off shelves because her publisher and her herself, I believe, were sued, and it was a cease and desist. And I think it was barely there for a month. And I read it before it could be taken down. And it's still in libraries. So, either she's outright lying, or she's telling the truth, and she's still portraying the bulldog in a magnificent light in order to fund her pockets. You know, she's one of those Jesus is my best friend Trump supporters too. So again, you know, being that way, I'm not surprised. So which is it? I think either one is bad. And I think it gives her zero to no credibility. I've acknowledged that Brett exaggerates, embellishes, is very bitter sometimes. But I don't see where the lie is here. I don't. Could Brett have gotten some things wrong? Maybe. But he said that it was from Jim Neidhart he got this stuff. And again, Neidhart was alive when this book came out. So, Diana, why didn't you confront Jim Neidhart about this? I mean, literally, he was alive another decade and a bit after this book came out. Now you're just going after Brett to maintain some relevancy here, it seems. But in all honesty, like I said, I can ask some friends of mine. I've always said Diana Hart, there's just something weird about her. And it's, hey, there's something weird about a lot of the Hart family from the outside looking in. And I just think that she's outright just talking out her ass and trying to get attention. But why wasn't this called out when Brett first put this in his book? Is it because she wasn't making as much money off of Bulldog's legacy then as she is now? I'm just speculating theories here, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was true. But either way, that's enough of that.